All right. Good evening. Welcome to an episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. For tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time this evening and on the weekend. What are we doing, folks? Well, as it turns out, my guest tonight is way out there in Alaska. And there are 4 hours between us. So in order to make this happen, the best time was on the weekend. So here we are. But I got a couple of other announcements really quickly. There will not be a live show Monday, that's tomorrow, or Tuesday. What? What's going on, Liberty Dad? Well, the missus is out of town and I'm on dad duty. And so the little guy got to get to school tomorrow. And guess who's going to take him? Me. That's right. So I will not be available to stream tomorrow morning or Tuesday morning, but I am planning to drop some episodes. I will drop a while back, you might remember that I was doing some Rumble premium content, and some of that content was walking through Mom Donnie's platform, like every single one of them. So I'll drop some of those tomorrow. Tuesday, we'll decide tomorrow how I got to look at some video footage. Today, I was working with my son. We did some gardening stuff and we tried to make a video of it. If the video turns out well, then I will drop that on Tuesday, kind of as a fun thing. If I look at the video and it's not that great, well, then maybe I'll just drop another Mom Donnie, or I'll do something else pre-recorded. And then we will be back Wednesday morning for our 47 Weekly. So look forward to that. Now, tonight, we are having on a guest that is running for mayor, Leighton Radnar. Hopefully I said his last name correctly. I forgot to double check before, so he can skewer me if he needs to, but he is coming to us all the way from Seward, Alaska. He is running for mayor, so please give a nice warm welcome for Leighton as he joins the show. Leighton, good sir, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice weather out today, and I just got done with a walk, so.
Awesome. And did I get your last name correct?
You did, yes.
All right, awesome. Good deal. Sometimes I don't get it right, and I just forget to ask, and I'm like, no. It was funny. I actually did a show. Luckily, it wasn't a guest, but I did an episode the other day on somebody that was in the news, and I was that Orest Shure, the guy from Space Force that went and shot those two kids, and I kept calling him Oren, and I didn't realize it until I was throwing that video up, and I was like, did I call him Oren through the whole show? And I was like, I sure did. So
I always
maybe
comment the easiest way to gauge people who hear my name, whether they'll pronounce it right, is how old they are, because people who remember SNL
Mhm.
hear Radnar or see the spelling and remember Gilda Radner, and so it
Mm,
always sort of which same name because related, but that's a whole different side note. But
gotcha.
yeah,
All right. So you're running for mayor as a libertarian, is that correct, or no? Or are you running as somebody else? I mean,
well,
other party.
I'm running as a libertarian, but we're bipartisan over here, so it doesn't really matter really what you run as. It's
Mhm.
more of about just city issues.
Okay.
Um, the structure is sort of odd over here. The mayor's position is sort of another seat on the council
Mhm.
and sort of guides the council, but doesn't have sort of as much like what you would call it, maybe plenary authority or authority that you would find in some other cities.
Mhm.
We're a city manager based government and sort of system here, which I have my issues with, and I don't have my issues with as a libertarian. I sort of take it and leave it as I go.
Mhm.
So bringing in libertarian ideas, but more so under the banner of just being an Alaskan, being a Sewardite, somebody who lives here.
Got it. Okay. So let's start from the beginning for anybody that's in my audience that may not know you. Kind of give a little bit of, just tell a little bit about yourself, who you are, the fun introductory stuff.
Yeah, so my like political bio would be that I got involved in sort of libertarian and sort of liberty movement politics somewhere around like 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And then came in from Ron Paul and like Thomas Massey type folks, and then sort of went down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and found a lot of other speakers and people from history. I'm really into history, so
Mhm.
started reading a lot of books, read Mises, read Hayek and Murray Rothbard and all these people, and sort of went down that path. And I've also read a lot of just random stuff throughout history of interesting thinkers,
Mhm.
and so but that moved me further down the political realm into like I ran for a position on the board for my Libertarian Party here, and I did win that in 2024. So I'm serving currently as a board member on the state party, and I was a delegate in Washington D.C. at the last national convention. I'll probably be a delegate again to Grand Rapids at this next upcoming convention.
Mhm.
And I would say I've built up a pretty good rapport with like all the podcasters and folks, because I've always sort of I run my own show on YouTube, and
Mhm.
then Outlawed Thoughts, and then I've had people on that show, and I've also done just probably a couple hundred different interviews and podcasts at this point around the space. And so I've become sort of just one of the people that's around talking
Right.
about stuff.
Right.
I talked about things from sort of an Alaskan nationalist perspective, I suppose you could say, more akin to like Joe Vogler or folks like that, without quite as much tinge behind it. I made a documentary about
Mhm.
Joe Vogler, which is
So,
probably what I'm most known for.
I'm not terribly familiar with Joe Vogler or Alaskan. You said nationalism.
Yeah,
So, can you describe what that is
or
for me and then for anybody
Alaskan
listening?
nationalists.
Oh, Alaskan
So
nationalism.
the concept was under Vogler's idea, which I actually have a great quote behind him. It says, "I'm an Alaskan, not an American. I've got no use for America or her damned institutions."
Okay.
And so this has sort of become sort of a sentiment in Alaska, starting in I would say the early 50s, when statehood became sort of murmured. People, a lot of people don't realize we were a very recent state, and we didn't get a lot of the same things that other states got when they were admitted to the Union. We also had it done through a voting process, which was a bit arguable, especially by Vogler's arguments back in the day, because it was done through a lot of federal employees and military personnel who were here, who weren't really residents. They were sort of brought up here by the federal government and then were allowed to vote in those processes. And so that became sort of an argument for Joe. He was a lawyer, so that's why he made a lot of these arguments. He was very But he was a fiery individual, somebody I got very interested in and wrote a documentary about. And I probably agree with maybe a quarter of what he actually professes, but just an interesting character. And Alaska nationalism is basically the concept of like most Alaskans view Alaska as better than sort of the rest of the lower 48. We refer to the rest of the states as the lower 48 for a reason. Those are places we sort of visit and then come back home. It's sort of
Okay.
in the same way that somebody I think in a lot of states that I've visited, frankly, that I enjoy, places like New Hampshire, sort of Florida, I think have a lot of those similar cultures where people are like, this is our place,
Mhm.
this is Florida, or this is New Hampshire, we do things this way. So it's just sort of that sentiment that I think a
Right.
lot of people lose.
Does it have anything to do? So look, I'm going to be straight honest with you. I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to anything Alaska. Like if you say DL, what do you think of when you think of Alaska? I'm like, Iditarod and snow, and maybe like Leighton dropping off the show. Where'd you go, man? I offended him already. I didn't even mean to, folks. No, I think he'll be back. So we'll wait for him to rejoin the stream here in just a moment. Um, but wow, that was unexpected, folks. Maybe the deep state, maybe they're big into the lower 48, and they didn't want him to speak. Perhaps that's what it is. All right, so I can kind of see you, Leighton. I don't know if you can hear me. Um, let's see. It looks like his video's sort of coming back. So we'll see, folks. We'll see how this plays out. Okay. I kind of see him. All right. Mic check. I don't hear you, sir. Let's see. I don't see it that it's muted. So I'm not hearing you just yet, but I can see you. Looks like he's plotting on me. So let's see. He is working on it, folks. So I will keep trying to talk. Obviously, we don't want dead air. That's not good. But as soon as he gets things worked out, you know how technology can be. I am still going to claim my conspiracy theory that the lower 48 is where the deep state mostly exists, and they just simply don't want him to be heard. But I could be wrong. It is a conspiracy theory. You know how those go. But we will see. We'll give him a moment to fire back in here, and then we will continue our conversation. Now, I will tell you this, folks. I had planned on something. I had planned on, after my little intro, quickly throwing on like gloves and a hat and a jacket to make it look like, like he's in Alaska. And like I said, I think of Alaska as really cold. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's like 60s there. And I was like, well, that would kind of kill that joke. So I did not do that on purpose, so I didn't look like a fool. So he has left the show for the moment, but we will be right back as soon as he jumps on. A little bit of technical difficulty there.
Okay. You
All
hear
right.
me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. All right.
I had to rejoin to get the microphone to unmute for some reason.
Gotcha. So I was asking you, I was like, um, what was I asking you? I said the when I think of Alaska, I think of like bitter cold, Iditarod, and like 6 months of no sun. That's that's my ignorance of Alaska. So what I was going to ask is the attitude of like, hey, we're Alaskans and those are the 48, does it have anything to do with like what I would perceive to be the rugged wilderness, and the survival necessity that we don't experience down here?
That's certainly part of it. I'd argue that especially people who are born and raised here experience a much hardier way of living, I guess is the way I would put it, than some people, especially in any kind of metro area or metropolitan area, any kind of big cities.
Mhm.
Um, you know, People here are used to driving very long distances to get to really like, supermarkets and get into necessities and stuff like that. And so that sort of culture is baked into here. Not to mention you have people who live way more rural than that, who live in villages or places where you can only really access them by plane,
Wow.
and that's certainly something that you don't really find in other places. I can't think off the top of my head any place that's in the U.S. technically that um, would fall into that sort of category. And then on top of it, you've got just the vast majority of Alaska that is completely unpopulated. So it's just open, expansive land.
Hmm.
The state is more than twice the size of Texas, so
Hmm.
it's a massive chunk. And when you really keep in mind, most of it is owned by the state or federal government, less than like 1.5% of it is owned by private people.
Oh, wow.
So the majority of the land is just sitting there doing nothing for the most part, or being used as like military bases, which is why you get a bit of this sort of attitude. I think a lot of it has to do, frankly, and I talk about this with um, in a few of my documentaries where I talk about the fact that a lot of it has to do with what happened sort of right after statehood, where the military came in because of the Cold War and used us as sort of a military sort of warehouse, is the way that Vogler and myself would put it.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, created a system where basically, even with the creation of the pipeline and all these things that we're known for being an oil state and all this, we don't have refineries. We don't refine our own oil because the feds won't let us. We can't get access to our own oil. So a big portion of a lot of the frustration in the state of Alaska comes from the interactions of state versus federal government, and it always has. And that goes right back to the government very quickly after statehood coming up here to test things like nuclear devices and blowing things up for the fun of it, and building sort of expansive military bases. And I think a lot of the local population starting late 50s onward just grew frustrated with that. So you still have, I'd argue probably a quarter of the population that if you bring up the federal government around them, they're just going to generally hate them. It doesn't really matter what topic you're on for the most
Right.
part.
So it sounds like if that's the case, if 25% of the population has a disdain for the federal government, then that seems like a prime spot, a state for a libertarian to live in if they could stand the cold weather.
Certainly,
It's you it's like
I've
you got your
uh,
argument made for you almost already.
yeah, certainly this place is great if you want to live, and especially if you're willing to live sort of that lifestyle and stuff. If
Mhm.
if you're somebody who's looking to move someplace, I've told people before, like, look at the land prices in other places compared to here. You might have better luck just coming over and building something and having, you can build a place that's set up pretty well so you can live pretty fancy if you need to.
Mhm. I gotcha. So let's jump into this mayor run. So what are your like? Tell me a little bit about the city. You've already talked a little bit about the mayor and how there's like this more bipartisanship, and it's less about party and more about like the city. So kind of explore that a little bit for me, a little bit more, because that's not something that I'm used to hearing, and I assume many of my guests are not used to hearing as well. And then we'll dive into talking about like your top issues and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it basically just means that the way that the system works here, and like in general, and then there are other cities in Alaska that work this way, is that the council has basically as much power. An individual council member theoretically has the same amount of power as the mayor. There's not really much of a difference between the two. The only real difference is that the like job description of the mayor is to sort of, you know, give suggestions or guide the city council in a way. And obviously, the mayor is a figurehead, so they're going to be the person that talks to, gives interviews, talks to people if they need to be talked to, stuff like that, and communicates. And so, and that's something that I've always enjoyed doing in general in the Libertarian Party, and furthermore in just volunteer positions, things like that. So, but the way that everything sort of works out, I mean, basically, to level, people claim politics aren't involved. I would make the argument they are to a degree. I mean, it's very difficult to remove everything that's bipartisan. Obviously,
Hmm.
you're going to have certain sort of hot button issues, and that comes into some of the reasons why I decide to run for a position like this, which
Hmm.
is the sort of more of what you talked about with sort of what issues I'm running on. Um, Certainly, a big thing, at least for me, I ran previously because of the whole COVID restrictions that were passed here in town and some disagreements there. But more recently, it's been this debacle we've had with our local utility, our electric utility here. Um, we have a contract that was negotiated, and then contracts came up, and the city sort of um, I think in a lot of people's eyes, squandered the situation and tried to take advantage of certain things. They tried to have somebody new come in and make bids and sort of take over the contract when the old company that was running it was doing, in my opinion, a much better job for the people who lived here. And they did that in a lot of executive sessions and with a lot of sort of a bit of mistiness to it,
Hmm.
that sort of ninja vanish effect that politics tends to have sometimes, where some of the biggest changes that are made in your local governments are the things that you don't pay much attention to. And I
Hmm.
feel like that was one of those. It very much became an issue people paid attention to, because then people's prices and bills started going up, and people started being threatened with the chance that it might go up further, and being told basically by the city council and many people in the position um, that it was only going to get worse because of them not allowing them to basically sell the utility or make this contract bid on the utility. And what ended up happening as a result of this is they took two votes at this and had public votes on it twice. And in both public votes, it failed. And I think it was a very much a public moment for the people who live here to see. These people pushed for this twice. The people spoke and said they didn't want it the first time. They forced it on you a second time. You said you didn't want it the second time. And I think it was a really good demonstration of how sort of things get pressed without people really speaking out about it. Frankly, I don't think there's hardly enough people involved in our local government here. I'd like to see a lot more people showing up, or at least listening to city council meetings. I work nights, so I'm open about the fact that I have to listen to these things often on YouTube and re-listen to live streams and sort of take notes, and that's something I do because I have the ability to with the way that I work. But um, I'm surprised by the number of people who didn't even know, for instance, when the vote was coming up for the utility stuff, or the chances for people to speak about it or stuff publicly, didn't even know that those things were happening. And I think that's really unfortunate. So I think it's a good position for the mayor to have, especially being that they are this sort of symbolic role and supposed to sort of point the city in the right direction. I think one thing that I've put forward is being super transparent, being more transparent, as transparent as possible, meaning executive sessions, things like that, are not going to be something I ever approve of, especially not publicly or during meetings, especially when it's not required. Things like that utility vote, that never should have been done. There never should have been any kind of executive sessions there. And then making just the door for the city hall building and for everybody sort of open for ideas, because we have a lot of issues facing town. One of them, another big reason I ran, was the jail here, which has been closed. So the police department here came forward and said we don't have good staffing, so we're closing the jail. And so since then, they've been carting people who need to be taken in over to what is a maximum medium security prison, and admitting them into a sort of separated area, from my understanding, to be held for whatever period they need to be, as though that was the jail. And there's obviously a slew of issues that can arise from this. One of the two biggest ones that I've pointed out sort of are the fact that this is going to involve the police officers having to leave to drive these people places. This takes time. This takes the officer away from the general area of the
Hmm.
city limits. It also costs more, in the long run, because you're having to drive these people back and forth and pay extra people on the long run. So, and then since this has happened, the police department has gone on to hire more people and to fund other things like buying vehicles and such, and we still don't have a jail. The building is sitting there, the equipment is sitting there, it is not being used. And so that's a big issue for me, and I think something that our mayor currently should be certainly vocalizing more than she has.
Gotcha.
Um,
So I have, all this is interesting because, and again, I'm gonna kind of highlight my ignorance here. I'm used to living in much larger cities. So what I'm looking at is I see your population is under 3,000 people. And
yes,
so,
yeah.
like, I guess my first question comes with, you said that the mayor is basically another city council member. So how, or effectively, so how many council members or how many people are there making decisions? And to what effect could the mayor, like, let's say you were mayor during some of these past decisions, like with the electrical utility, what kind of things could you have done to perhaps maybe change the course of how things played out?
Well, I think certainly the first thing is just speaking out. I think that's the easiest thing, is
Mhm.
making your voice heard. If you have the mayor's moniker, and that you sit in that chair and you're the person chairing the meeting and you're sort of present, I think you have sort of, regardless of whether you have literal authority,
Mhm.
you certainly have an authority to speak that people pay attention to, certainly locally, and that the local officials pay attention to, the city manager, all of these individuals sort of take note of. And um, on top of that, I think voting with your conscience and voting with what you believe is correct to what the people of the town actually want is
Mhm.
important.
Right.
And when I look at a lot of these situations, I go, even if you're going to lose this vote, making these votes public, not an executive session, not behind a closed doors, but actually public for people to see. These are the people who are voting against your interest, and these are the people who are voting for your interest, is really important. Because frankly, I think if you're going to live under a democracy, it has to be transparent in that
Right.
way. Otherwise, you don't know what you're voting for the next time around.
Right.
And so that's something I think is imperative with the situation we have here, and that's why in general, like, the whole executive session thing has been something I've raved about, and I think that's something other people experience in other towns, even big ones, where occasionally there'll be things like financial votes that come up. I've seen in county or in council meetings in other states, and they will go to executive session, and you think, well, why? Like, is it because you don't want people seeing how much money the town makes behind closed doors, or what individual things bring in money? Like, that doesn't make sense. Of course they should know that. It's their tax money paying for everything. It's the tourists that come into their homes and their businesses that are paying for everything. So it just it doesn't make sense to me from that perspective.
Gotcha.
And so
So
I think that's
it
what I'm
sounds like a
trying to.
bully pulpit situation is kind of what, if I understand
Exactly.
correctly,
Yeah,
bully.
it gives you the ability to basically, and from a media perspective too. Frankly, I'll be honest, I don't think anybody who's been mayor of this town has effectively used the position to work with the media, and working with media that's outside of Seward. I have a unique vision in that because my position in the Libertarian Party is communications director, and I've also done podcasting and done,
Mhm.
radio and these kind of things. And so I look at it and go like, well, that's an opportunity to be talking more in your position and vocalizing what people here want, and trying to drum up new businesses here and new people to move here.
Gotcha. So I'm still puzzled about. Well, I don't want to say I'm still. I'm a little puzzled because you said like one of your top issues is dealing with the jail that shut down. Do you have that much crime with only 3,000 people that the
So, to
jail
be honest
ends
with
up
you,
being?
you wouldn't think about it, but we have a huge tourist industry here.
Oh,
We're a giant port. We bring in a lot of cruise ships and we bring in a lot of state tourism. So we have a small population, but we have probably 8 hotels, 9 hotels here just on the main drag, and they will be full all summer. So
oh,
we're a very busy area for that. We bring cruise ships in here all summer that have 3,000, 2,000 people on them. at a
Mm-hmm.
time. And so we're used to, I mean, we're one of the biggest areas in the state, probably the busiest area for restaurant activity and bar activity and things like that. We do get um, what I would say would make up the majority of things, frankly, is probably drunk tank issues,
Mm-hmm.
which is a perfect example because, frankly, I think in a lot of situations, you know, because this is going to take more paperwork, more time it takes an officer away from town, how often is that person going to be just let back out and sort of allowed to do their own thing? And that can lead to complications. That's not something I can clearly voice because I don't know the numbers in that regard, but it's something I'm certainly aware could be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have faith in the officers that I've met here that they mean good when they are, trying and they're doing their job properly. I have no issue with them at all. I just have an issue with that individual thing. We should have a jail. Every town that has this population should. I
Mm-hmm.
don't understand. I mean, you should have the ability to adhere law, and we have a magistrate or judge here, and likewise, we should be able to have the ability to sort of handle these issues in house, so to speak. We have a courtroom for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
We have a police force for a reason, and I think, frankly, there's a certain bit where a police force without some form of jail, to me, seems almost inadequate. You don't have the
Right.
tools you need to complete the job. When you have that raving lunatic that's running through town doing something horrible, God forbid, uh, what, you're going to lock that person in a jail that's not active, or you're going to throw that person in the back of a squad car and store them there until you can get them to this other facility? To me, that just seems backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe the priorities need to be shifted, and if it's a funding issue, then frankly the city needs to prioritize funding that over other things. And that's a big issue we have, is spending. I mean, as any city frankly has. I mean, it
Right.
almost goes without saying, but we have a big problem with not bringing in enough money and spending way too much money. And we're charging more and more for what were tourism amenities here. Things like our campgrounds and stuff have become far more expensive. Our RV parking spaces are more expensive, and I don't frankly see a reason for it because we haven't really added much to those areas in regards to services, and so we're basically just gouging people at this point. I think that's part of the issue, is the city, instead of trying to fix the budget, and the council, rather than try to fix the budget, would rather basically figure out where they can get that money from. And one of the big things that brings into the conversation is the concept of annexation, which has been brought up now multiple times by people within city government in passing, and anybody who's local knows that this is something that constantly gets talked about. But annexation is the idea. We have that 3,000 people, 2,500 people in that range here in town. We also have a bunch of people who live outside the city limits on either side of us. And so then the argument becomes, well, hey, if we annex this portion of outside of town, we have a new tax base.
Mm.
And so, obviously, as a libertarian, I'm not for this. I think it's thrusting our city's basically problems on other people who don't deserve it, who didn't ask for it. Historically, when they tried to annex before, it caused what was damn near a riot in the city. So,
Mm.
uh, I'm hoping ultimately things like that don't happen, and so I'm a voice for basically, and I put this in my candidate statement when I submitted it, to keep Seward Seward. That
Gotcha.
we don't need us to be another Juneau, which is probably the most famous at this point tourist town that's been, in most of the locals' words, crippled by the tourism industry and destroyed by tourism. I don't want us to become that. I want us to keep some character, keep what
Mm.
makes us Alaskan, while also bringing in a hell of a lot of money for the people who invest their time here. And so, I want more people who live here year round that don't leave during the summer like a big chunk of our population does. And the way that you do that is by building economic stability here and making Seward a really strong investment for people. And right now, I'd say it's doing a kind of poor job doing that.
Gotcha. So I noticed when I was kind of looking you up a little bit that you previously ran, and I was not aware of this, until I researched it. But you ran for the Alaska House of Representatives, District 5.
I
And
actually forgot to mention that myself. Yeah.
what's interesting to me is that you ran in a two-way race and you got 22%, so far above the typical 1 to 3% that libertarians are used to, begging for. So tell me a little bit about that race, kind of what you learned. Talk about the things that you feel like you did good, the things that you feel like you did, maybe not so good. Learning mistakes and whatnot. It's kind of give me a clue of how that played out for you.
Yeah, certainly. Like most libertarians, I went into that kind of knowing that it was going to be an uphill battle. I was running against a Republican, and the state is still mostly Republican at the end of the day. But the Republican I was running against is a Republican, Louis Stutes, who's worked sort of intimately with Democrats and was on the bad end of a couple big votes that Democrats sort of backed that Republicans hated, including allowing trans individuals to participate in high school sports and things like that. That I certainly had a bit of a voiceful argument with.
Mhm.
Went back and forth with some folks back then, and she's been pretty bad on spending issues, and so she, was a bit older. I noticed no one else was running. I discussed it with some local people, decided that I would throw my hat into the ring, and then I'd say what I did really well is I marketed the hell out of myself. I went on every radio show that invited me. I went on every podcast that I could think of that sent me an email locally or not locally, people who hit me up on Twitter or Facebook. And I think I probably went on the radio 12 times in that
Oh.
what was a very short campaign, and I think that did a lot of good for me. I also did all the candidate forums with her in person or over Zoom, but with her verbally. And I have to say, I think I performed pretty well in that, and I think it garnered me a good amount of votes, especially locally. A big part of my vote total, if you look at the breakdown, which I did on the state of Alaska thing, I think somewhere in the ballpark of 900 of those votes that I got, or 1,200, it was one of the two, came from Seward. So a big chunk of whoever voted for me came from the town that I live in, frankly, because I think people here knew me and knew that obviously I'd be a better representative than somebody who didn't live here. But I think it proves that here in Alaska, libertarians have a bit of a better shot than typically in other areas. I mean, we do okay, especially in areas like my area where we're a small town. The Kenai Peninsula, I'd say, is far more libertarian. Kenai, Soldotna, Seward,
Mhm.
Whittier, those are sort of the surrounding towns here. Um, and I'd say they're more libertarian than most,
Okay.
cities you're going to run into.
Gotcha. So what is okay? So it sounds like the best thing that you did was go everywhere you could possibly go, which I am
Yeah, get the name
huge.
out there.
I'm a huge advocate of that. Here in Jacksonville, a couple of years ago, we ran three. We ran three libertarian candidates for city council. Our city council is 19 members, and then we have a
Oh,
mayor.
wow.
And one of the guys, he just showed up everywhere. He showed up unannounced, just like he would just show up to a place, even if whether he was invited or not.
Yeah, I was
And
just going to random events.
yeah,
I'd see, oh, there's an event in town. I'm going to be there. You
yeah,
know.
and this is one thing that I've tried to impress upon libertarians. I'm like, go everywhere, like nonstop. Like if you can get in anywhere, because we tend to be a smaller party, we tend to have a smaller name, and so the only way that you can break out of that is literally just start showing up, literally everywhere. And he got like 35% of the vote in a two-way race, and
You know.
he started out as a nobody. And what I mean by that is nobody knew his name, nobody knew the party. We had like it was basically starting from scratch. And he ended up getting like 35% of the vote. I think it's like 34 point something, but 35% of the vote. And so I'm a huge fan of that model. I'm just like, get out there, shake hands, kiss babies wherever you can go. Right. Because that's just to me like, and I see the strategy other, and like Okay. AOC did it as well. She went knocking doors all over the place, right?
Yep.
Love
Well,
her.
this is the whole Young Americans for Liberty model too. I've been through their candidate training and
Right.
all of their stuff, and that's the whole thing. That's what they teach you, is like that whole grassroots effort of like
Yeah.
being there when someone needs you. If somebody calls you, pick up the phone. If somebody needs a volunteer someplace, go do it. Who cares
Yep.
what party it's for? Be there.
Yep.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah. So what did you do that you look back and you're like, not going to do that again?
Yeah, so I probably could have polled people a bit more.
Mm.
I wish I had talked to more people outside of Seward,
Hmm.
and some of the other areas that I would have been representing. And if I had done that, I would have been able to talk more about issues like the fishing industry, which is something that I've since made myself much more educated on. But
Okay.
I'll be perfectly honest with you, Stutes had me beat on that topic. The general economics of that topic, I think I have her beat on, but the history of it, things like that,
Hmm.
she's been here, and experienced a lot more than I am. I'm younger, obviously. I'm 25, going on 26. So
Hmm.
I would be the second youngest mayor elected in the state of Alaska. With the youngest being, I believe, 24.
Mm.
This is it's not necessarily a small thing in that regard. Like, it's sort of a weird, um, you know, um, but I look at it and go, experience wise, I look at the way that I gained experience. Certainly,
Hmm.
what I did probably worse of all was the not doing enough research into the topics I didn't think about. You sit down and you make your sort of pie chart of what you think people care about, and you're doing it from your worldview. So my biggest advice to people is just like talk to as many people as you can. And going to events certainly helped with that. But I should have been doing more events and more things outside of my general vicinity, because I would have gotten a better interest in the topics that were outside of my
Mm.
general bubble that I didn't get otherwise.
Gotcha. That sounds like good advice to me. So you mentioned a moment ago that when you looked at the numbers, a great portion of those that voted for you in the last election, they came from Seward. So that's going to presumably help you out in the mayoral race. How many people are you running against for this particular seat, and what do you think the vibe is currently for you?
So I'm running against two people. The this time it's not a one-on-one, but it's sort of a weird situation. One of the people is sort of a wild card. His name's McDonald, and he's an individual who's ran for office multiple times before. Has not really garnered a ton of support,
Mhm.
and so he's somebody that I'm interested to actually speak with. I've never gotten to have a real conversation with him, so it's hard for me to voice an opinion on him personally.
Mhm.
I can say just sort of that people have told me he's ran a lot before and hasn't really gotten a ton of support, and so I don't know what the situation is there until I sort of shake his hand and have a conversation. I don't want to talk ill about no one. But as far as my other competition, Sue McClure, she's the mayor currently, and she's been in that position for a little while now, and was in that position during that whole Homer debacle that I talked about. And so um, I'm definitely interested, and hopefully, the people that voted for me in the representative position that I was running for sort of vote for me for this council position, and also I can speak to enough people and maybe have a couple public events, and do some speeches and talk to people about sort of my vision and things, versus what we've been doing, and sort of how I'd like to bring sort of a fresh outlook on the way that we should be sort of attacking some of the issues that we have, like our budget and the jail issue, and some of these issues like sidewalk maintenance during the winter, and boring city stuff that people
Mhm.
don't really think about. But when you're in a small town, it really impacts people. I
Mhm.
I have a grandmother who's in her 80s. I live very close to the senior center, which is full of people who really can't walk around during the winter because the maintenance is poor by the state, and the city refuses to do a lot of it because they say it's the state's position to do it. And I say, well, if they're not doing it, then you need to pick up the slack and get it done, and you can sue the state if you want to. But this has to get taken care of because these people need to be able to walk. And if you're paying taxes in this town, you ought to have access to the sidewalk no matter what the temperature is. And so, if other cities can do it, we ought to be able to do it too. And so, those are a lot of the things that you hear brought up by locals, and they don't ever seem to really get addressed, even though we're spending all this money and all this cash is flying out everywhere. None of the things that actually would impact people's day-to-day life actually change. And I think that's ultimately, my biggest argument over the whole time me being involved in local politics here in general, because I did run for council in the past, was that the town's government here has grown faster than the population and the people and the businesses. And so the government at this point is very much inflated and doing way too much, and the town has gone sort of stagnant in a lot of areas. And the only thing that can correct that is the free market, getting the government to shrink its size, shrinking the budget here, kind of getting things under control, and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, to use an old cliche,
Right. So, okay. So let's say you're running. Let's say you get elected, and is it a 2 or 4 year position?
Actually, it's a 3-year.
Oh, 3 year. Okay. I'm used to hearing either 2 or 4.
Mhm.
Okay. So you got 3 years. At the end of your 3 years, how are people going to judge you, or how would you want them to judge you? Like, what does success look like when you leave office, presuming that you don't rerun, run again, or if you do?
I would hope that people saw what I did as being good in the long run.
Mhm.
That's really my only hope. And what I mean by that is I hope that people see that, I'll be honest, I think my goal will be somewhere in the ballpark of 20%, meaning 20% of our budget over a 3-year period. I don't think is an insane thing. I don't think saying I want to cut some of these things by those numbers is crazy. If I can be successful in that, I think over the next 5-10 years, it will legitimately have a meaningful impact over this city. And so, regardless of whether I'm remembered for it or whether I'm given accolade for it, I know what it will do economically, because that is the one thing I am smart on. And I think that ultimately it's sort of the argument that was made back in the day when our country was being founded of, you plant a tree that you might not get the chance to really enjoy the shade of, but a small economic change today can affect things not just tomorrow and the next day and the next day, but 10, 20, 30 years from now, for the people's kids who are growing up here, who will never have the opportunity to own a home here, who will never have the opportunity to own property here, who are going to be left completely in the lurch. And Seward has been a place that's thrived on sort of the passing down of mantles and this sort of rich history we have. I have books up here on my shelf that are, almost 100 years old, talking
Wow.
about Seward and the history of this town. We're named after the guy who made the purchase of this land, the entirety of the state of Alaska, William H. Seward. We are the namesake of the guy who is arguably, from a federal government perspective, the most important person in Alaskan history. And I think we ought to be a beacon for what Alaska should be. We're home to mile 0 of the Iditarod Trail. That ought to mean something. We ought to carry these things forward with a bit of reverence for the history and the, what this town was historically. We were a gold boom town. We used to have 10,000 people stretching across a glacier here, all looking for riches. We're no stranger to tourism. We've been a tourist town since before tourists were coming on trains. So to me, it's we have to go back to the fundamentals,
Mhm.
right? What do you want your city government to do? Do you want your city government to be controlling zoning to the point where housing can't be built? Do you want them holding on the lands that shouldn't be held on to, that should be released to public purchase so that something can be actually done with it instead of it sitting stagnant? Do you want the lack of a jail so that the people that are brought into your drunk tank, by the way, many of which could be our loved ones, frankly? I mean, like, you could be in a situation, say you're somebody in your 60s here, you got your 25-year-old kid who goes out to the bar and has a, hard night out with his friends. He gets drunk and gets in a fight, and all of a sudden he's getting sent over to Ravenwood or one of these prisons here locally that are not meant for people who are going in a drunk tank, who are not meant
Right.
for people who are going in for what is something that they'd be released the next day for. Like, they don't deserve that. They don't deserve the trauma of that or the hassle, and the cops don't deserve to be put through it either. So the whole thing sort of compiles, and if you're me, you come away from it and go, well, the only way any of this can get solved is if somebody's in the driver's seat that can at least voice these things on a public stage and make these issues heard, sort of, if like you said, by bully pulpit if need be.
Mhm.
If you don't want to talk about it, well, we're going to talk about it. It's on the agenda. Here it is. And that's sort of what has to be done, frankly. And the media has to be talked to about things too. I think we were a town that used to have a paper. That paper no longer exists. I've made the argument a few times, and libertarians will cringe at this, but I think the city here should help with getting some kind of media apparatus set up in a way of funding somebody to purchase printers, get another paper started here so that people can be getting the information locally. When you're in a small town like this, frankly, the internet just isn't a good way to get it done.
Mm. Interesting. No, and it's funny. I don't actually cringe because what I look at is I say, when you're at a local level, there are things that I would consider to be permissible, or if we really want to go there, tolerable, that I
Yes.
wouldn't at the state level, and certainly not the national level. And I think that's a fair
We are
point.
in pure agreement there.
Right. I think it's a fair point that you make that, hey, we know what's best for Seward, or I know is what you're saying. And, the internet is not as, yeah, if you're in DC, if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, the internet may be a great way to keep up with the local news, but here, not so much. We could use a local paper. And one of the things that I've always argued for, and it sounds like you're on board with it, is getting, I think the government's number one job really should be, or maybe not quite the number one job, but right up there, should be communicating information so that you have informed citizens. So I would actually
Oh, I
welcome the idea.
fully agree with that. I mean, that's perfect way of putting it. In fact, I think that we have a responsibility as a city to and this is part of what I talked about a little while ago when I mentioned that I don't think enough people are involved with the government here. Like, how are you ever going to get more people involved if you're not explaining the way this process works? You're not educating people on the way this whole thing goes.
Mhm.
One of the criticisms I'm going to get as a candidate is, you're young. You don't have a ton of experience. Are you going to be able to chair a meeting? Do you have experience with Robert's rules? I've told people before, I'm in the Libertarian Party. We deal with Robert's Rules of Order, so I have at least some experience there, and I have I've read through Robert's Rules, and I'm friends with people who've been mayor of other towns that use it, and people who chair Libertarian parties, and I have a wealth of people I can talk to about that. But I look at it and go, we have an issue of getting people involved with government media, like it or not. As much as I dislike the CNN and the Fox News is out there and all that stuff, local media, specifically papers, have a rich history, especially in the United States, going back to our founding of things like standing on a soapbox on a town corner and telling people what your opinion of things were. We papers and news, printed news, have existed here for as long as we have, and frankly, I think there's a reason for that, which is, for instance, here in Seward, we have a very large populace of people who are over the age of 65, who, a lot of these people who I've spoken to, don't have smartphones. They don't have laptops that they can pull out of their, back pockets and start typing away to bring open, whatever website, or scan a URL code, or scan a QR code to get to some website because you sent them a flyer in the mail. They want a piece of paper. If they're going to vote on something, sometimes if it's something that doesn't have to be one of those types of, official state ballots, yeah, you might have a position where, why don't we just mail these things out to everybody in town and have them fill them out? and verify them. Give each individual person a phone call and verify that's how they voted. You know, whatever you have to do, but it's important that you get more people involved because that's how democracies like this function. Otherwise, you're going to have a very small number of people in the town making all the decisions. I don't think that's a proper way to run things.
I gotcha. All right. Well, we're getting close to our time here. So give us your final words and then let people know how they can support you. Whether it's campaign donations, just get you on another podcast, or however it is that it's going to work for you.
Yeah, so I would say to kind of close things out, I have a candidate statement I put out on Facebook. I think if you go to my Facebook account, Leighton Radnar, which is my name, it's easy to find. That statement I put out has my name on it. That sort of explains sort of where I'm at, a headspace in very few words, and lays everything out. It's like 250 words, so really easy to read. But basically, it just explains that I want to keep Seward. I want to obviously accept free market ideals and all that, but I want to keep the budget lower. I want to get these things fixed here and get the jail back up and running, and these sort of topics that I've expanded upon here. As far as support goes, I will be able to accept at least some donations as far as campaign stuff goes. I haven't got everything set up here because I'm not sure whether I actually need to yet, because I have a couple people I'm talking to here in town. And if that works out, then I might as well not. I actually filed an exempt form. So the way that works here is I can raise and expend up to $5,000 in either direction, and I don't have to do all of the monthly reporting and crap to my APOC rep. So it just makes things a little bit easier. We live in such a small town, there's no real reason to ever do anything more than that anyway. So the most I'm going to be buying is some signs and stickers and things like that. So I shouldn't need to get donations. The biggest thing people can do is I put out announcements on my Twitter, retweet stuff like that, so it gets up in the Google algorithm. That helps me because it helps with my name recognition. And then on the Facebook thing, if you have me on Facebook, go share it. I know that's kind of old school, but a lot of the people here locally use Facebook, so they see a big number next to the share thing, and it somehow makes their eyes light up. And then I do YouTube, so that too. I'm going to have some videos up there talking about this run and sort of documenting what it's like to run for mayor in a small town. So if you've ever been interested about learning that sort of from the horse's mouth as it happens, I'm going to be doing sort of vlogs intermittently every couple weeks in this run and talking about the things that I've been doing each few weeks. I think that'll be an interesting experiment, and that'll go up on the Outlawed Thoughts channel. And then my Twitter's at Liberty Leighton.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to add all of those to the show notes so that people can find you. Leighton, thank you so much for joining me. This was actually a very fascinating conversation. You're very well spoken, and you seem like you are absolutely prepared for this. So I hope you win. More so than I would normally say. Like normally, I want my libertarian peers to win their elections, but I really want you to win because, man, you sounds like you've got some great ideas, and I don't even live there.
I appreciate
But you're doing well in the communication department. So sounds like you're right where you need to be. Good job, sir. I'm going to put you backstage as I close the show. If you need to go, you can. If you want to stick around and chit chat for a moment or two after the show, that's fine as well. But again, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. I'll stick around for a second.
Sounds good. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know it was a little off schedule, but hey, we do what we've got to do around here to bring people on so that you can hear about them and learn from them as I have tonight, and then maybe pick up some tips and tricks as you go about your libertarian journey. And maybe you're a candidate as well, or you know a candidate, maybe you're helping out a candidate, all of those things. This is why I do the show, to help folks like you out. So keep in mind, if you're a candidate, I want to interview you. Also, if you're a dad, I want to interview you as well. I do both of those. My Dad Talk show is Fridays. That's where I step away from the politics and the culture arguments that we have on the show Monday through Thursday. And we just talk to dads or dad-ish related stuff on the show. That's my Friday. So if you're a dad, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, or 6:30 p.m. If those times don't work out, reach out to me. We'll figure something out and we'll get you on the show. Love talking to dads. It's awesome. Love talking to candidates, just like I did tonight. That is great as well. Remember, tomorrow I will not be live. I will also not be live on Tuesday morning because I am playing dad duty this next couple of days while my wife is out doing some business. So, but I will drop some stuff. I'll drop it, some Mom Donnie tomorrow, and then I'm still working out what I'm going to drop on Tuesday. But I will be back live Wednesday. With that, I'm going to head on out of here, and I will see everybody. I will see you Wednesday, as I said.